My grandfather died with his eyes open, staring at something in the corner of his hospital room that nobody else could see. His last words weren't a goodbye or an "I love you." They were a warning. Don't let them take you to the high places when the mountains move. I was 12. I thought he was delirious from the morphine. I was wrong. My name is Dr. Sarah Whitmore, and I'm an anthropologist specializing in indigenous cultures of the Appalachian region. For 15 years, I've studied the oral traditions, settlement patterns, and spiritual practices of the Cherokee, Shawnee, and other tribes who once called these mountains home. And for 15 years, I ignored the most consistent pattern in all their histories, the absolute, unwavering refusal to settle in certain areas of the Appalachians, specifically a region the Cherokee called Dunaqualeni, the mountains that walk. This is what I've learned. This is what I wish I'd never discovered. And this is why some knowledge should stay buried. The academic world likes neat explanations. When I first encountered references to shifting mountains in my graduate research, my professors dismissed it as metaphor. Geological instability, they said, landslides, the natural wariness of earthquake-prone areas. These were rational people with rational explanations, and I absorbed their rationality like gospel. But here's what they couldn't explain. Why did at least 7 distinct tribal groups, separated by hundreds of miles and different language families, all have nearly identical prohibitions about the same geographical region? Why did their stories share such specific details about what happened to people who violated these boundaries? And why, this is the question that eventually consumed my career, why did every single one of these cultures have elaborate rituals specifically designed to determine if the mountains had moved recently? The Cherokee called them Dunaqualeni. The Shawnee had their own name, Mishinawe Wapaji, which roughly translates to the peaks that hunt. The Catawba spoke of Yehasure Nide, the hills with hunger. Different languages, different cultures, identical fear. I spent 5 years cataloging these references, dismissing them as geological metaphor. Then I met Thomas Blackwater. Thomas was Tsalagi, Cherokee, from a family that had somehow avoided the Trail of Tears by hiding deep in the North Carolina mountains. His people had kept the old ways alive, passing down stories that most Cherokee had been forced to forget. He was 83 when I interviewed him, sharp as broken glass, with eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. "You're the woman asking about Dunaqualeni," he said when I arrived at his cabin. It wasn't a question. Somehow, through the network of remaining indigenous families scattered through Appalachia, word had reached him. "Yes, sir. I'm researching settlement patterns and... You want to know why we never went there?" He lit a cigarette, hand steady despite his age. Why whole areas, good hunting land, rich soil, stayed empty while our people crowded into less hospitable places? That's exactly what I'm trying to understand. He studied me for a long moment. You ever notice how white people always think they're the first ones to discover something? Like the land was empty before they got here, like we didn't have thousands of years to learn its secrets and its dangers. I felt my face flush, but he wasn't entirely wrong. Academia has a way of privileging written records over oral tradition, as if knowledge doesn't count unless it's been peer-reviewed. My people knew these mountains like you know your own heartbeat, Thomas continued. We knew which plants healed, which streams ran pure, where the deer would be in each season, and we knew where not to go. More importantly, we knew why. He invited me inside. His cabin was small, neat, filled with the smell of tobacco and wood smoke. On one wall hung a map, old and hand-drawn, showing the Appalachian Range. Certain areas were marked in red. "These are the Dunaqualeni regions," he explained. "See how they form a pattern? Not random. They run along what you'd probably call geological fault lines, but it's more than that. Much more. The red zones snaked through the mountains like veins, connecting points across hundreds of miles. I recognized some of the locations, areas that even today remained strangely underdeveloped despite their natural resources. In 1750, Thomas said, a group of Shawnee hunters broke the prohibition. They were young, arrogant, thought the old stories were just superstition meant to keep the best hunting grounds for the elders. Sound familiar? Same pattern your people follow. Assume tradition is just ignorance dressed up in ritual. I bit back a defensive response. He was right, and we both knew it. There were 7 of them. They went into the Dunakwaleni during what we call the quiet time, when the mountains seem most normal, most safe. They set up camp in a valley my grandfather said was beautiful beyond words. Clear water, deer everywhere, caves that would shelter them from any storm. Paradise. Thomas pulled out a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. One of them survived long enough to make it back. This is his account, translated and written down by my great-great-grandfather, who was the village healer. He began to read, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The first night, nothing seemed wrong. We made camp, started a fire, ate well. Mikasi killed a deer that practically walked into his arrow. We joked that the old ones had kept this place secret because they wanted it for themselves. Second night, Tall Pine noticed the ridge across the valley looked different. We argued about it. He swore a rock formation shaped like a wolf's head had been on the left side of a distinctive split peak. Now it was on the right. We told him he was turned around, that all these mountains looked similar. But I'd noticed something too. The cave we'd stored our supplies in, I could have sworn it was 30 paces from our fire. Now it seemed to be 50. I measured it twice, 50 paces exactly. Third night we stopped joking. All of us felt it now. The valley was wrong. The stream that had run east to west now ran north to south. The trees were in different positions. Not different trees, the same trees, including one lightning-struck oak we'd used as a landmark. But they'd moved. The whole forest had rearranged itself like pieces on a game board. Tall Pine wanted to leave. Mikasi called him a coward, said we were disoriented, that the mountains all looked alike and we'd simply lost our bearings. They argued, almost came to blows. Looking back, I think the place wanted us to fight, wanted us divided. Fourth night, the mountains moved while we watched. We'd kept watch, all of us too unsettled to sleep. Just after midnight, under a moon bright enough to read by, the entire landscape shifted. There's no other word for it. Like a blanket being pulled, like someone rearranging furniture in the dark. The ridgeline flowed like water. Trees slid across the ground, roots and all, leaving no trace of their passage. The stream reversed its course in an instant, water flowing uphill, then settling into a new channel, as if it had always been there. And the sounds. God, the sounds. Like the earth itself was grinding, breathing, digesting. A rumble you felt in your bones more than heard. Some of us screamed, some of us prayed. Mikasi vomited. When it stopped, maybe 2 minutes later, though time felt strange, might have been longer, we were somewhere else entirely. The valley had changed shape. Our campfire was now at the base of a cliff that hadn't existed before. The cave with our supplies was gone, just gone. Smooth rock where the entrance had been. That's when we started running. Didn't matter which direction, just away. But you can't run from a place that controls space itself. Every path led us in circles. We'd climb a ridge, certain we were headed north toward home, and find ourselves back at our campfire. We'd follow the stream, and it would loop back on itself in impossible ways. The mountains were playing with us, herding us. Fifth day, or what we thought was the 5th day, time had stopped making sense. Tall Pine suggested we split up. If the land was trying to keep us together, maybe alone we'd have better luck. Mikasi argued, but what else could we try? We agreed to each go a different direction, mark our path, meet back at the campfire by sunset. Only 3 of us came back, Tall Pine, Mikasi, and me. The others? Kohana said he'd found a way out, a path that led down the mountain. He refused to stay another night. We watched him descend into a ravine. Clear sightline, maybe 200 paces away. He walked down the slope, and then he just wasn't there anymore. Didn't disappear in a flash. He just ceased to be, like he'd walked behind a curtain. We screamed his name until our voices gave out. Nothing. Paco we found, or what the mountains left of him. He'd climbed a tree, maybe trying to get perspective on the valley, figure out the pattern of how things moved. We found him integrated into the tree, not hanging from it, not impaled on it, merged with it. His arm became a branch, still clothed in his sleeve, his face visible in the bark, mouth open in a scream, eyes that could still see. He was alive in there, aware, trapped. We tried to free him. Mikasi grabbed his hand, the one that was still flesh, and pulled. Paco screamed, and the tree screamed with him, a sound wood shouldn't make. When we let go, the tree pulled him deeper inside. We watched his face sink into the trunk like he was drowning in solid oak. The last thing he said, "It's hungry. The whole mountain is hungry. It doesn't want to kill us. It wants to keep us. Forever." The other two who didn't come back, I hope they died. I hope they didn't end up like Paco, conscious and trapped in stone or soil or the very air itself. Sixth night, just the three of us left. We huddled by the fire and compared what we'd seen on our solo journeys. Each of us had found things that shouldn't exist. Mikasi discovered a meadow where the grass grew in perfect spirals, and in the center, bones. Hundreds of bones from dozens of different animals and other things. The bones were arranged in patterns like words in a language we couldn't read. Tall Pine had found a cave, not our supply cave, a different one. Inside were paintings on the walls, ancient paintings, he thought at first. But then he realized they were moving. Not like flickers in firelight. Actually moving, figures in the paintings turned to look at him. He ran. I'd climbed to a high point, trying to spot anything familiar, any landmark that might orient us. Instead, I saw other valleys, dozens of them, and in each one, fires. Campfires like ours, and around each fire, shapes that might have been people. I shouted, waved my arms. Every single shape turned toward me in unison. Then they began to climb toward my valley, toward us. We ran again, found ourselves at the bottom of a gorge we'd never seen before, steep walls on both sides, only one way forward. We were being funneled. At the end of the gorge, we found a structure, not natural, not exactly man-made either. Stones stacked in impossible configurations, defying gravity and geometry. Arches that hurt to look at, angles that your eye slid off of. And at the center, an opening. A doorway leading down into the earth. Something wanted us to go inside. We could feel it, a pull like hunger, like desire. The mountain itself was inviting us in. Mikasi started walking toward it. No hesitation, like he'd been waiting for this. Tall Pine grabbed him, shook him, screamed at him. Mikasi looked at us with eyes that weren't entirely his own anymore and said, "Don't you understand? This is where we're supposed to be. This is where everything that enters Dunakwaleni eventually goes. We can fight it, suffer for days or weeks or years, or we can accept. The mountain will have us regardless. It always does." He pulled free from Tall Pine's grip and walked into the opening. We heard his footsteps descending for a long time. Then we heard something else. Wet sounds, breaking sounds, and then, worst of all, singing. Mikasi's voice, but changed, echoing up from below in harmonies that one throat shouldn't be able to produce, words in no language humans speak. Tall Pine and I ran. Pure panic. No strategy, and maybe that's what saved us. We didn't try to navigate, didn't try to find the logical path out. We just moved with absolute terror driving us. No thought, pure flight instinct. Somehow, as the sun rose on the seventh day, we stumbled out of Dunakwaleni. One moment we were in that impossible valley, the next we were on familiar hunting grounds, a full day's travel from where we'd entered. Tall Pine made it back to the village, told them what happened. The elders nodded like they'd heard it all before. They performed purification rituals on him for 3 days, smoked him with sacred tobacco, gave him bitter herbs to drink. They said the mountains had marked him, and they needed to break that connection before it pulled him back. It didn't work. A month later, Tall Pine started walking in his sleep. His wife would find him standing at the edge of the village, facing south toward Dunakwaleni. He'd wake up screaming, saying the mountains were calling him home. That he'd never really left, that part of him was still there, would always be there. 3 months later, he disappeared, left his wife and children in the night. We found his trail leading south, followed it for a day until it entered the red zone, the boundary our people had marked generations ago. His footprints continued on the other side, but we wouldn't cross to follow. As for me, I didn't make it back to tell this tale, not all of me. Most of me is still there, in that valley, in that mountain. I walk and talk and seem alive, but I'm less, hollow. Like most of my spirit leaked out somewhere between the fourth night and the seventh morning. I dream about it every night, the structure at the end of the gorge, the opening leading down, and I know with absolute certainty that one day I'll go back. Not because I want to, because the mountain isn't done with me yet. It let me leave to serve as a warning, but warnings expire, stories fade, and when people stop believing, when they stop respecting the boundaries, the mountains get hungry again. This is my testimony. This is my warning. Stay out of Dunakwaleni. Stay away from the peaks that hunt, the hills with hunger. They are patient. They have forever. And they always, always collect what they're owed. Thomas closed the journal. His hands were shaking. The man who gave that testimony disappeared 6 months later, just like tall pine. My great-great-grandfather noted that in the margin. Also noted that for 3 generations afterward, our people wouldn't even hunt near the boundaries of Dunakwaleni. The prohibition was absolute. I sat in silence, processing. The rational part of my mind was cataloguing this as a fascinating example of oral tradition, cultural memory encoding genuine geological dangers into supernatural narratives. The other part, the part that had seen my grandfather's death stare, that had felt inexplicable dread in certain remote areas during my fieldwork, that part was terrified. "You think I'm sharing ghost stories?" Thomas said, reading my expression. "You're already categorizing this as primitive superstition, aren't you? Metaphor for landslides, maybe. Generational trauma from some forgotten earthquake." I'm trying to understand the underlying reality is exactly what the story says it is. The mountains move. The land is alive in ways your science doesn't have frameworks to understand. And it hungers. He pulled out a second item from his collection, a newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle. Asheville Citizen-Times, 1923. Hunting party vanishes in remote mountains. 5 men went into an area that matches the Dunakwaleni boundaries. Experienced outdoorsmen, well supplied, never seen again. No bodies recovered. Another clipping. 1947. Geological survey team, 3 people disappeared. Last radio transmission mentioned unusual magnetic readings and landscape inconsistent with topographical maps. Another. 1968. Hikers report moving mountains and shifting trails. Park rangers find them 3 days later, 15 miles from where they should have been, suffering from dehydration and exposure. All 3 insist the mountains rearrange themselves, that they walked in circles despite following their compass. Chalked up to disorientation. He had dozens of them, clippings spanning nearly a century, all describing disappearances, strange experiences, and unexplained phenomena in the same general areas his people had marked as Dunakwaleni. "Your people keep going there," Thomas said. "You buy property, build vacation homes, hike the trails, and every few years some of you disappear. But you never connect the pattern because you don't believe the pattern exists. You think every missing hiker is an isolated incident. Every strange experience is individual disorientation. You've convinced yourselves that the world is entirely knowable, mappable, safe, that if something was truly dangerous, truly other, your science would have found it by now." He leaned forward and his voice dropped. "But what if there are things that don't want to be found? What if there are places that actively hide themselves, that can manipulate space and perception? What if the Earth itself, in certain locations, under certain conditions, is not the solid, predictable thing you think it is?" I wanted to argue, wanted to explain about confirmation bias, pattern recognition in random data, the human tendency to see agency in natural phenomena. But the words stuck in my throat, because I'd been there. 3 years ago during fieldwork in eastern Kentucky, I'd camped in an area I later realized fell within one of the red zones on Thomas's map. And I'd experienced something. Nothing as dramatic as the 1750 account, just small wrongnesses. A stream that seemed to change direction, trees I could have sworn were in different positions each morning. A sense of being watched by the landscape itself. I'd dismissed it, blamed exhaustion and the isolation of solo fieldwork. But I'd left that area a day early, packed up my camp with shaking hands and hiked out, telling myself it was just pragmatic time management. In truth, I'd fled. Some deep ancestral part of my brain had screamed danger, and I'd listened. I was there, I admitted quietly. 3 years ago, near Pound Gap. Thomas nodded slowly. Pound Gap sits right on the edge of a Dunaqualeni zone. You felt it. I felt something. But that doesn't prove anything by your standards, I know. You need reproducible results, controlled conditions, peer review, but some things can't be studied that way. Some knowledge can only be gained through experience, through generations of observation, through respecting what our ancestors learned the hard way. He stood, walked to his window. Outside, the mountains rolled away in endless ridges, blue-green and ancient. Your science is young, brilliant in many ways, but young. A few hundred years of systematic observation. My people's knowledge goes back thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands. We've seen things, learned things, that your frameworks can't accommodate. So what am I supposed to do with this information? I asked. Write a paper arguing that mountains are alive and eat people? I'd be laughed out of academia. I'm not telling you to convince anyone. I'm telling you to stop going there, stop sending your students there, and maybe, quietly, honor the boundaries our people died to establish. I left Thomas's cabin with my worldview shaken. Spent the next 2 years trying to forget the conversation, to reframe it as a fascinating cultural data point, nothing more. Then the Harlan County incident happened. In May 2019, a geology graduate student named Marcus Chen went into the mountains of eastern Kentucky to study fault line activity. His research was focused on microseismic events, small tremors that might predict larger earthquakes. He'd set up monitoring equipment at several locations, including 2 sites that, I later realized, fell within traditional Dunaqualeni boundaries. Marcus was brilliant, meticulous, and he kept detailed field notes. His advisor shared them with me after Marcus disappeared, hoping my knowledge of local geography might help search and rescue efforts. Reading his notes felt like staring into an abyss. Day 1. Equipment setup complete at sites A and B. Interesting topography here. Local maps seem inaccurate. GPS coordinates don't quite match visual landmarks. We'll need to recalibrate. Day 3. Microseismic activity is unusual, getting regular tremors, but they don't match standard earthquake patterns. It's almost rhythmic, like breathing. Equipment malfunction, we'll troubleshoot. Day 5. Site B has moved. I know how that sounds, but the seismometer I placed on a specific rock outcropping is now 200 meters from where I left it. The outcropping itself has moved. Checked GPS multiple times. Either all my equipment is malfunctioning simultaneously, or I don't know what the alternative is. Day 7. The tremors are definitely rhythmic. Intervals of 6 hours and 17 minutes, almost exactly. Each quake lasts between 2 to 3 minutes. During these events, the landscape appears to shift. I've started video recording, but the footage is distorted, like the camera can't process what it's seeing. This shouldn't be possible. This can't be possible. Day 9. I found something at Site A, a cave that wasn't there yesterday. I've surveyed this area 3 times, no cave. Now there's an opening in the cliff face, approximately 2 meters high, 5 meters wide. The rock around it looks wrong. Melted, grown. I can't describe it. Air coming from the cave is warm and smells like copper. Going to investigate tomorrow with proper lighting. Day 10. Didn't investigate the cave. I'm leaving. Something is fundamentally wrong here. The mountains are moving, not metaphorically, actually moving. The landscape reconfigures during the tremor events. Sites I've marked are in different locations. Trails I've hiked appear and disappear. And last night, I don't know what I saw. Shapes in the darkness moving through the forest. Not animals, not human. They moved wrong, bent wrong, were wrong. I'm packing up and getting out. Day 11, can't find the way out. I've been hiking since dawn, following my compass northeast toward the highway. Should have reached it hours ago. Instead, I'm at Site B again. Or what used to be Site B. The equipment is gone. The landmarks are rearranged. It's like the mountain is keeping me here. Day 12. The cave follows me. Wherever I go, I eventually find that opening in the rock. Different locations, different cliff faces, but the same cave. Same dimensions, same warm air, same copper smell. It wants me to go inside. I can feel it. A pull, like falling, like hunger. I won't. Day 14. Running out of food. Water is okay, streams everywhere, though they change position and direction. The tremors are more frequent now, every 4 hours instead of 6. During the events, I've seen impossible things. The sky has bent, gravity has shifted. Yesterday a tremor hit while I was climbing a ridge. Up and down, reversed for the duration. I clung to the rock face while the world spun around me. I've stopped trying to leave. Trying seems to make it worse, like the mountain is punishing me for the attempt. Now I'm just surviving, moving when I have to, hiding during the tremors. If anyone finds this journal, this place is not right. The geology here operates on principles I can't understand. Space is fluid, the earth is alive, and it's aware of me, always aware, watching through the trees, the rocks, the soil itself. I feel its attention like weight on my chest. Day 17. I went into the cave. I don't remember deciding to. I was setting up camp and then I was just walking toward it, like sleepwalking. By the time I realized what I was doing, I was already inside. The cave goes down, and down, and down. The walls are smooth, almost polished, covered in patterns that might be natural formation or might be writing. The warm air flows up from below, and with it sounds, not quite voices, not quite music, something that makes my bones vibrate and my teeth ache. I descended for what felt like hours. No, I know it was hours. My watch confirms it. 4 hours of walking downward on a slope that should have taken me miles into the earth. But when I finally turned back, panicking, convinced I'd never find my way out, I was at the entrance again within minutes. Like the cave contracted, spat me out. But I brought something back. Or something followed me out. I can feel it now, even in full daylight. A presence, attached to me. In me? I don't know. My shadow looks wrong, moves a fraction of a second out of sync. Sometimes it's darker than it should be, denser, like it has more substance than I do. Day 19. The presence is stronger. I hear it whispering in my own voice, telling me to go back to the cave. Promises me understanding, belonging, purpose. It shows me visions. I am part of the mountain, rooted like trees, flowing like water, eternal and aware and complete. Part of something so much larger than myself. The rational part of my brain knows this is wrong, dangerous, probably a symptom of isolation and stress. But rationality is getting quieter. The whisper is getting louder. To whoever finds this, I'm Marcus Chen. I'm 26 years old. I'm a graduate student at UK. I have parents who love me, a sister, friends, a life outside this place. I need to remember that. Need to hold on to who I was before the mountain started showing me who I could be. Day 21. I understand now. The tremors aren't earthquakes. They're the mountain digesting, processing. Whatever it is, whatever lives here or is here, it consumes. Takes in matter and energy and consciousness. Those shapes I saw in the forest. Previous meals, previous visitors, still partially formed, still partially themselves, but being slowly absorbed into the greater whole. Paco, from the 1750 account Thomas told you about. If you're reading this, Dr. Whitmore, and I think somehow this journal will find its way to you, Paco is still here. I've seen him, still in his tree, or maybe he is the tree now. The boundaries between self and environment break down here. Everything feeds into everything else. The mountain is an organism, or a god, or something else entirely that we don't have words for. It thinks, it hungers, it plans. It creates the shifting landscape to trap prey, to confuse and disorient. The cave is its mouth, its stomach, its core. And once you descend far enough, once you get close to whatever is at the bottom, you become part of it. I'm going back down, not because I'm being controlled. I want to be clear about that for my own sanity. I'm choosing this. Because the alternative is starving to death up here, or going mad from isolation, or being slowly absorbed piece by piece like Paco. At least if I go down willingly, maybe I'll retain some sense of self. Maybe I'll understand what this is before I stop being Marcus Chen entirely. If this journal makes it out somehow, tell my parents I love them. Tell them I made a choice at the end. And Dr. Whitmore, if you're reading this like I think you will be, the indigenous peoples were right about everything. Listen to them. Honor the boundaries. Stop sending people into places we don't understand. The mountains move. The mountains hunger. The mountains remember. And now, I suppose, they'll remember me. That was Marcus's last entry. Search and rescue teams found his base camp, abandoned. Found his equipment scattered across several miles. Pieces of it in locations that made no geographic sense. They found his journal in a waterproof bag, hung from a tree branch at the entrance to the search area, like it had been deliberately placed there for someone to find. They never found Marcus. His advisor gave me the journal because I'd written papers on indigenous mapping of the Appalachian region. Thought maybe I could identify where Marcus had been, help narrow the search area. Instead, I opened it and felt the bottom drop out of my world, because I recognized the descriptions, recognized the pattern. Marcus Chen had walked straight into Dunakwaleni, ignored every warning sign, and paid the ultimate price. I photocopied the journal and returned it to his advisor. Told him I couldn't help with the geographic details, which was true because the places Marcus described couldn't be mapped. Not reliably, not when they moved. Then I drove back to Thomas Blackwater's cabin, showed him the copies, watched his face grow grim as he read. Stupid, he said when he finished, but his voice was sad rather than angry. Brilliant and educated and stupid. Had all the tools to measure and analyze, none of the wisdom to recognize what he was measuring. He thought he was studying geology, I said quietly. He was. But geology isn't what he thought it was. Not everywhere. Not here. Thomas set the journal down. This is why we mark the boundaries. Why we teach our children the old stories, even when your schools tell them it's just mythology. Because sometimes the only thing keeping you alive is knowing where not to go and having the wisdom to listen. I need to do something with this information, I said. I can't let more people disappear into these areas without warning. Thomas looked at me with something like pity. What will you do? Write a paper? Present at a conference? Tell the academic world that indigenous oral tradition was literally correct about monsters in the mountains? They'll destroy your career. More importantly, they won't believe you. They'll do exactly what Marcus did. Go into the danger zones convinced that science can explain and control everything. He was right. I knew he was right. But I couldn't just sit on this knowledge. There has to be something, I insisted, some way to honor the truth without sounding insane. Thomas thought for a long moment. There might be. But it requires you to change your approach. Stop trying to prove anything. Stop trying to convince anyone. Instead, just document. Record the stories, map the boundaries, create resources that people can find if they go looking. Plant seeds. The people who are ready to understand will find the information. The ones who aren't? You can't save them from themselves. Over the next 3 years, that's what I did. I interviewed every indigenous elder who would speak with me. Cherokee, Shawnee, Catawba, Yuchi, Monacan. Collected dozens of accounts, all describing the same phenomena in different words. Mapped the Dunakwaleni zones with as much precision as possible, cross-referencing traditional boundaries with modern disappearance reports. The pattern was undeniable. Areas that indigenous peoples had marked as forbidden showed significantly higher rates of missing persons, equipment malfunction, and reported strange experiences. The correlation was stark enough that it couldn't be coincidence, yet subtle enough that it was easy to dismiss if you wanted to. I published my findings in a small anthropological journal framed as cultural geography and traditional ecological knowledge. Dry, academic language. No mention of living mountains or hungry landscape. Just objective documentation of the correlation between traditional prohibited zones and modern incident reports. The paper was largely ignored. A few colleagues praised the interesting cultural perspective. Others criticized my methodology, suggested I was seeing patterns in noise. Nobody took it seriously as a safety warning because I couldn't frame it as one without sounding unhinged. I thought that would be the end of it. I'd done what I could, documented the truth in a form that might help someone someday, tried to honor both my academic training and the indigenous knowledge I'd been privileged to access. Then my niece, Emma, decided to hike the Appalachian Trail. She was 22, fresh out of college, full of that invincible confidence young people have. When she told me her plans, I felt ice in my stomach. "That's wonderful," I said, forcing enthusiasm. "When do you start?" "Next month. I've been training, saved up money, got all my gear." "I'm so excited, Aunt Sarah. 6 months in the wilderness, just me and nature." I pulled up her planned route, traced it with shaking fingers. She'd passed through 3 Dunaqualeni zones, 3 areas where the mountains moved and people disappeared. "Emma, I need to talk to you about some parts of this route." I told her everything, broke every academic protocol, abandoned all pretense of objective distance. Showed her Thomas's maps, Marcus Chen's journal, the 1750 account. Laid out 15 years of research and the horrifying conclusions I'd reached. She listened politely. Then she smiled. "Aunt Sarah, I love that you've gotten so into local folklore. It's really cool, actually. But these are just stories. Cautionary tales about respecting nature and staying safe in the wilderness. They're not just stories, Emma. They're warnings based on thousands of years of—" "I'll be careful," she interrupted gently. "I promise. I'll stick to the marked trails, carry GPS and a satellite phone, check in regularly. But I'm not going to avoid entire sections of the trail because of ghost stories." The same dismissal I'd given my grandfather, the same certainty that modern knowledge had surpassed ancient superstition. I tried everything, showed her the statistics on disappearances, offered to pay for a different route, begged her to at least skip the most dangerous sections. She thought I was having some kind of breakdown, became concerned about my mental health. Her parents, my brother and sister-in-law, thanked me for caring, but said I needed to let Emma make her own choices. Suggested maybe I'd been spending too much time on fringe research and should get back to more mainstream academic work. Emma started her hike on April 15, 2022. For the first month, everything was fine. She checked in regularly, sent photos, seemed to be having the adventure of her life. I tracked her progress obsessively, felt my anxiety spike every time she approached one of the red zones on my map. On May 18th, she entered the first Dunaqualeni area, a section of trail that wound through the remote mountains of southwest Virginia. Her last check-in was cheerful, excited about the really cool geological formations she'd been seeing. Then silence. For 3 days, nothing. No calls, no GPS pings from her satellite device. Park rangers organized a search, found her campsite abandoned, tent still standing, food still in the bear bag, gear neatly arranged. Her journal sat on a rock, pen beside it mid-entry. The entry read, "The mountains here are beautiful but strange. Trails don't quite match my map. GPS seems off. Coordinates make no sense. Going to climb to that ridge for better signal." They found her GPS device on the ridge. Just the device, nothing else. Like she'd set it down carefully and walked away. The search continued for 2 weeks. Hundreds of volunteers, dogs, helicopters. They found nothing. Emma had vanished as completely as Marcus Chen, as completely as countless others before her. I hiked into the search area myself, against the ranger's advice, stood at the boundary of the Dunaqualeni zone and called her name until my voice gave out. Part of me hoped she'd answer, part of me was terrified she would. On the 6th day of searching, I found something. A tree at the edge of the prohibited area, distinctive because it had been struck by lightning and split down the middle. Carved into the bark, fresh and deep. "Aunt Sarah, I understand now, I'm sorry." No other trace of her, just those words carved by someone with shaking hands. I like to think she's still alive in some form. Merged with the mountain like Paco, like the shapes Marcus described in the forest. Still conscious, still aware, part of something vast and ancient and terrible. The alternative, that she simply died, body unrecovered in some random accident, somehow feels worse. At least if the mountain has her, she's still Emma somewhere, even if that somewhere is beyond my ability to reach or help. Thomas Blackwater died 3 months after Emma's disappearance. Heart attack, sudden and painless. At his funeral, his daughter gave me a leather bag. "He wanted you to have this," she said you'd earned it. Inside were all his maps, his journals, his collection of accounts and evidence, decades of documentation carefully preserved. And a note in his precise handwriting: "Dr. Whitmore, you've learned what our people have always known. The question is what you do with that knowledge. You can't save everyone, can't force wisdom on those who aren't ready for it. All you can do is maintain the boundaries, keep the stories alive, and hope that future generations are wiser than this one. The mountains are patient. They'll still be here when humanity is dust. Make sure someone remembers why certain places should be left alone." Thomas. That's what I'm doing now. This account you're reading is part of that effort. I'm documenting everything, creating a record that might outlast me. Not for academic journals, they've made it clear my folklorist phase is professionally embarrassing, but for anyone who goes looking, for anyone smart enough to ask why indigenous peoples avoided certain areas. Because here's what I've learned, what 15 years of research and personal tragedy have taught me. The world is not what we think it is. Our modern scientific worldview has given us incredible power, amazing understanding, but it's also blinded us to truths that don't fit our frameworks. We've convinced ourselves that reality is uniform, predictable, knowable, that anything unknown is simply not yet understood, just waiting for the right instruments to measure it. But some things resist measurement. Some phenomena only reveal themselves to those who approach with respect rather than analysis. And some places on this earth are not safe, not containable, not subject to human understanding or control. The indigenous peoples of Appalachia knew this. They learned it through millennia of observation, through terrible lessons, through oral traditions that preserved knowledge across countless generations. They mapped the dangerous places, established protocols, taught their children what to avoid and why. Then European colonizers arrived with their certainty that they knew better, dismissed indigenous knowledge as primitive superstition, settled in the forbidden areas because the land was unclaimed, not understanding it was unclaimed for a reason. And people started disappearing. They're still disappearing. Every year, hundreds of people vanish in national forests and remote wilderness areas. Most are probably ordinary tragedies: falls, exposure, animals, getting lost. But some percentage, some specific cluster of cases in specific locations follow the pattern. Enter Dunakwaleni zones, experience the wrongness, disappear completely. And we don't connect the dots because to do so would require admitting that our ancestors, specifically the indigenous peoples we displaced and decimated, understood something about this land that we still don't. It would require humility that our culture struggles with. I'm not saying we should abandon science. I'm saying science is a tool, brilliant and useful, but limited. It excels at understanding systems that follow consistent rules. It struggles with phenomena that are intentional, aware, adaptive. With entities that don't want to be studied. The mountains move. Not metaphorically, not through simple geological processes, though those play a role. They move because there is something in or beneath or as those mountains that is alive and hungry and vastly old. Something that experiences time and space differently than we do. Something that occasionally rearranges its territory like a spider tending its web. Marcus Chen's seismic readings were accurate. The rhythmic tremors he recorded were real. But they weren't tectonic events. They were breathing. Or digestion. Or something else our vocabulary can't capture. The cave that followed him around was real. Not the same cave appearing in different locations. That's still thinking too linearly. It was an opening that exists in a space we can access but don't fully perceive. Like a mouth that can appear wherever the mountain chooses to open it. And the consumption? That's real too. The mountain, or whatever entity the mountain is an expression of, feeds on matter and energy and consciousness. Takes people in, breaks down the boundaries between self and environment, integrates them into something larger. They don't die, not exactly. They become part of the system. Aware but not individual. Present but not recoverable. Is it evil? I don't think that's the right framework. It's no more evil than a spider eating a fly or a whale consuming krill. It's hungry. It has always been hungry. And it will continue to feed regardless of our moral judgments about the process. The question is whether we're wise enough to respect the danger, to honor the boundaries established by people who understood this threat, to admit that some places should be left alone, not because we lack the technology to exploit them, but because they are genuinely hazardous in ways we can't mitigate. I've compiled all of this into a database: maps, accounts, analysis, recommendations. I update it regularly with new disappearance reports, cross-referencing locations with traditional Dunakwaleni boundaries. The correlation remains stark. If I could get mainstream authorities to take it seriously, how many lives might be saved? But I can't. Because the moment I suggest that indigenous oral traditions were literally accurate about specific geographic dangers, I lose all credibility. Better to let people keep disappearing than to question the primacy of modern knowledge over ancient wisdom. So instead, I do what Thomas suggested. I plant seeds. Write articles that don't quite connect all the dots, but lay out the information for those ready to see it. Give lectures about traditional ecological knowledge that include just enough detail about prohibited zones to make curious students investigate further. Maintain a website that looks like a folklore archive but functions as a survival guide. And I stay away from the red zones. I've spent too long studying them to risk entering them again. I know too much about what's waiting there. The mountains are aware of me now. I can feel it sometimes, a distant attention, like being watched by something patient and vast. They let me document and warn because warnings are part of the hunting strategy. They make the eventual capture sweeter. Emma's still there, Marcus Chen, Tall Pine, Paco. Hundreds or thousands of others across the centuries, still conscious, still aware on some level, trapped in earth and stone and living wood. Part of something we can't understand and shouldn't try to reach. Sometimes, late at night, I think I can hear them. A whisper on the wind, voices in harmony, singing in no human language, calling me to join them, to stop resisting, to accept what they've accepted. To come home to the mountain, I won't. I'll die of old age in civilization, away from the peaks that hunt. But I wonder increasingly if that matters. Because the presence Marcus described, the thing that followed him out of the cave, I think I have it too. Have had it since that night in eastern Kentucky, years ago, when I camped in a Dunakwaleni zone and fled. My shadow is wrong, moves just slightly out of sync. Sometimes it's darker than it should be, more solid than shadow ought to be. And in that darkness, I sometimes see shapes, suggestions of Emma's face, Marcus's silhouette. Figures I don't recognize, countless victims across countless years. They're still here, still trying to warn us, still hoping we'll finally listen. This is my warning, my contribution to the chorus of voices crying out across generations. The mountains move, the mountains hunger, the mountains remember, and they are patient. Stay away from the shifting peaks. Honor the boundaries marked by people who died learning where they should be. Don't let modern arrogance convince you that ancient wisdom is primitive superstition. Because I've seen what happens to those who ignore the warnings. I've read their last words, traced their final steps, felt the presence they brought back with them from places humans shouldn't go. And I've accepted that one day, despite everything I know, I'll probably join them. The mountain has marked me. Part of me is already there, has always been there. The presence in my shadow grows stronger each year, the whispers louder. It's not a question of if, but when. When that day comes, I hope someone finds this account, adds it to the archive of warnings that stretches back centuries. Maybe the next generation will be wise enough to listen. Maybe they'll honor the knowledge that indigenous peoples preserved at such terrible cost. Or maybe they'll do what every generation has done, dismiss the warnings, trust in their own brilliance, and walk straight into the mountains that hunt. If you're reading this and planning to hike or camp or explore in the Appalachian Mountains, please pay attention to the locations I've documented. Cross-reference them with missing persons reports, notice the pattern. And when you see it, when you realize that certain areas have claimed far more victims than random chance would explain, make a choice. You can dismiss it as coincidence. Go ahead with your plans, confident that your GPS and satellite phone and modern gear will keep you safe. And maybe you'll be fine. Most people who enter Dunakwaleni zones come back out. The mountains are selective, patient. They don't take everyone. Or you can choose wisdom, honor the boundaries, recognize that some places are prohibited for reasons that remain valid regardless of how much time has passed or how advanced our technology has become. Choose to believe that maybe, just maybe, the people who lived here for thousands of years before us actually knew what they were talking about. Emma didn't believe. She's gone. Marcus Chen didn't believe. He's gone. Countless others across the centuries made the same choice, with the same result. I believed too late to save anyone I love. But maybe I can save you. Maybe this time someone will read the warnings and actually listen. The mountains are still there, still moving, still hungry, still waiting for the next person arrogant enough to think they know better than millennia of hard-won wisdom. Don't be that person, please. I don't want to hear you singing in the dark places, your voice added to the terrible chorus. I don't want to see your face in my shadow, another victim calling out warnings that no one will hear. Stay away from the shifting mountains, stay alive, stay human. That's all we can do. That's all we've ever been able to do. The mountains remember everyone who ignored the warnings. Let them remember you as the one who listened. Please. Dr. Sarah Whitmore, former professor of anthropology, current keeper of boundaries. Last updated February 2026. If you are reading this and have experienced strange phenomena in any of the documented Dunakwaleni zones, please contact me through the encrypted form on my website. Your account could save lives. If you have entered a prohibited area and feel a presence following you, contact me immediately. There may still be time for intervention. If you are planning to enter any of these areas despite this warning, leave detailed information about your route and timeline with someone you trust. Mark your calendar for regular check-ins, and carry this document with you. If something goes wrong, if the landscape starts shifting, if you find caves that weren't there before, turn back immediately. Don't investigate. Don't try to understand. Just run. The mountains are patient, but so are we. We will keep marking the boundaries, keep telling the stories, keep trying to save whoever we can. May you never need this warning. May you be wise enough to heed it. The mountains are watching. They're always watching. Don't let them see you as prey.